आज इंटरनेट सिर्फ आधे अधूरे सच और पूरे झूठ में डूबा हुआ है। किसी के पास गहराई से सोचने का या शांति से सुनने का वक्त ही नहीं है। हम एक ऐसा शांत कोना बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। Nope, not your ordinary podcast for entertainment.
Nope. Why is midday meal so important? We keep hearing about it every now and then.
See, the midday meal came in with a purpose. It came in because there were a lot of issues in terms of hunger. There's what we call the classroom hunger. So children were coming in, sometimes they were skipping breakfast and they were coming into the classrooms. They were not able to concentrate. So when the scheme was introduced, the whole idea behind the scheme was multiple. It was, one is to increase enrollment in schools because there was a lot of dropout and all the children were not attending school. So that was one of the reasons. The other was, like I said, classroom hunger. There was also a vision to get children to eat together, to break this whole caste barriers, segregation, children being made to sit separately. That was one of the very important ideas behind bringing the midday meal scheme. It's 1/3 of a child's nutrition. So it's a very important part of what the child takes in. So for instance, if a child is skipping breakfast and child is coming into the classroom, the child is sleepy, child is not concentrating, and within our whole caste structure, if you see, children are quickly labeled, quickly stigmatized. So they'll say, you are stupid, you're not learning. The children are made to drop out of school. So the idea that a child comes to class with a full stomach and is able to focus, I think all those were the reasons behind bringing the scheme in. Also, there was the National Food Security Act, which came in 2013. It came after a lot of struggle. So the People's Union for Civil Liberty, they also filed a case. The Right to Food campaign has been fighting for this food as a right. So there's right to life, there's also right to dignity. And food is a very important part of that. And within that, they brought in the public distribution system, which is the rations. They also brought in the Anganwadis, that is through the ICDS scheme. And then the midday meal scheme was also the other intervention as part of the right to food. So it's a legal right. They did some calculations and they say that children who are in, from say 1st to 5th standard, they get about 450 calories and 12 grams of protein. That is how much they're supposed to get with each meal, which is 1/3 of their daily requirement. And older kids, that is up to from 6th to 8th standard, it is around 700 calories and 20 grams of protein.
So the midday meal scheme keeps kids in school healthy and make sure there is less dropout ratio. But what is it that the midday meal scheme does to normal order that people want to change it? Like in some states, they'll want to take the egg out. In some states, they will even call it Saatvik. So how did we come to this place when we started with the intention of making sure everybody has food, the kids are more attentive in class?
Yeah.
So how is that transitioned into such a polarizing topic?
Yeah, I think the midday meal has kind of become a playing ground for all kinds of agendas. So you have the political, you have the social, you have the ideological, you have the corporate. Everyone is like, the midday meal scheme has become the target in different states. So, for example, the whole idea of the midday meal scheme was also that it will use locally available foods. So it's not like you'll take a child from Punjab and tell them to eat rice, or you'll take a child from South India and tell them eat rotis. It has to be cultural. It has to be what the child is used to eating at home. It also has to be prepared using local ingredients. So it's not like you're shipping foods or exporting or manufacturing somewhere and transporting it. So once you talk about culture, then the question comes in, whose culture? And what we're seeing increasingly is that there are groups who are very dominant. They control media, they control policy. They're the ones who become doctors. They're the ones who they're the researchers, and their whole narrative is to promote this idea of India as vegetarian. And it is so important that they're willing to compromise on everything else. And what we really need to understand is the vegetarianism of those who are rich, like whether they are from a better class or better, with a more caste group which has more power, more agency, socioeconomically better. The access that they have, the vegetarianism that they have access to, is very much different from what they impose on the poor. So what finally the poor, the Dalit, the Adivasi, the OBC communities end up eating is mainly cereal. So whether it's wheat or millets or rice, finally at the end of the day, that is a major share of the food that they're consuming. And you also have this whole narrative that again it comes from a caste location, which basically classifies foods. So bad enough you classify people as superior and inferior, also classifying foods, and you're saying something is Saatvik, something is Tamasic, something is Rajasic. And contracts have been given to corporates. Like you have organizations which have a front of charity, which project themselves as public interest institutions or organizations, but finally they are very much corporate, they're very much business minded, and that model actually works very well. It's called like a public private partnership. So the public gives you the funds, it's a taxpayer's money, but you are a private entity. It's almost like that entity has only rights and no responsibilities. So when their rights are violated, they're protesting, they're saying we didn't get budgets, and they're fighting and they're threatening to withdraw the scheme. But when it comes to responsibilities, it's very shaky grounds. So even if you want to go through RTIs, you want to get information, it's very difficult to actually hold these organizations accountable. And they have been given these contracts across different states in the country. One of them very prominent is Akshay Patra, which is a sub-group of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So it is like ISKCON. And they have started this organization called Akshay Patra, which has literally got the contracts in many states to provide the midday meal for the kids. And how they operate is they have, so first of all, they say they're a charity. So the idea of food as a right, as a legal right, gets slowly undermined. If you see the advertisements, they're like, we feed poor children. So it's like, it's a charity. And therefore they get a whole lot of money. It's like international funds, national funds, which is unaccountable, non-transparent. And in fact, their own board of directors resigned, 2 years back, saying that there's no transparency. Money in the name of the midday meal scheme is being routed. There's a lot of conflict of interest, a lot of crony capitalism. People with family ties are, actually owning theirs, benefiting. There's no transparency. And they have what we call a lot of informal connections. So what you have on paper, so if you see even recently the Poshan guidelines, so any NGO or CSO which is being given the contract for the midday meal scheme, they should not come with any agenda. Like they should not, first of all, they should not discriminate based on caste or religion or gender or anything. And they should not use the scheme to propagate any, particular religion or any kind of prejudice or any kind of propaganda. You cannot use the midday meal for propaganda. So that's there in the guidelines. It came in 2017. But if you see, it's not only Akshay Patra. For instance, in Karnataka, you have an organization called Adamya Chetana, which talk about Saatvik. And they say that Saatvik food is good for children. So what I was telling you, that children, they don't concentrate because they're hungry. Many of them also have anemia, therefore they're tired, they're fatigued. And it's all comes from very, caste and class kind of background. But they have used that to say that these children, because they eat tamasic foods, that's why they don't concentrate. So they say that kama, lust, increases if you eat tamasic food or rajasic food, concentration comes down. They say what the children have is not real hunger, it's fake hunger. And using that, they're promoting this whole idea of Saatvik. There's no research, there's no evidence. There's absolutely no trials, no clinical trials to prove that Saatvik is anyway better than
So when they
Tamasic.
say Saatvik, more than vegetarian, what else do they mean? What does the meal look like?
See, foods, we have 6 food groups. We have the cereals and millets, you have the legumes, pulses, you have the fruits, vegetables, milk, dairy, meat, and fats and oils. So fats and oils are an important food group, but they just blanket say that fats and oils are not good. They'll say some foods make you like hyperactive, or they'll make you lustful, or they'll make you criminal. And so they have a whole list of these foods. For example, onion and garlic. They say onion and garlic is tamasic. But culturally, a lot of people eat it. In fact, we find children eat less because the food is so bland. They say eggs are tamasic. They say egg is a menstrual discharge of the hen. And all the nutritious foods, meats, they say meat is tamasic. They say eggs are tamasic. So milk, though technically it's an animal source food, it's classified as vegetarian, but doesn't come from a tree or plant, right? It's a source in terms of composition, it is animal source. So only that gets located within Saatvik. And why that's, it's important to recognize that is because the vegetarians get their proteins, their vitamins and minerals because they have access to milk and dairy. And this is not available to the communities that get their sources from meat, beef, pork, or red meats, chicken, organ meats. Organ meats is a huge source of nutrition for people. So all of those have been pushed into the polluted, the tamasic, and even the people who eat it are classified the same. So people who eat it, it's not only the foods that are bad, it's even the people. And that's how this whole caste system gets propagated. And what they do is, interestingly, in Karnataka, they brought out a position paper on health and wellness, again targeting the midday meal scheme, where they say that, eat your grandmother's food, eat what your grandmother makes. And their idea of grandmother itself is a Saatvik grandmother. So the culture also you're erasing. The children are told about this idea of Pankti Beda. Pankti Beda means Indian culture does not discriminate. In fact, they say Hanuman, Bhim, all of them are Saatvik. So these should be your models for the children. And so they say that Pankti Beda means if, say, there are 5 of us in a room, and 2 are vegetarian and 3 are meat eaters. By eating meat, you are discriminating against those who don't eat meat. So that's what the children in school. So we visited a lot of schools. The children tell us, why should we eat eggs when the other children don't eat? We are discriminating if we eat. So the notion itself of discrimination, the notion of equality itself becomes respect the vegetarian, respect. And Saatvik, so it's so Akshaya Patra now, it's not only that they provide the food, they also talk to the children, they also talk to the faculty. So there is also a process of indoctrination that is happening.
And that was never the plan with midday meals in any way.
Yeah, it was the opposite of it, which was the plan. The opposite is to encourage diversity, encourage people from different backgrounds to, live together, to respect each other. So now, respect in the school framework is the vegetarian should be respected by the meat eaters by giving up their own cultures, give up your own foods. And ironically, like for example, in Karnataka, it's like 97% of the children eat meat at home. So those who are pushing for vegetarianism and Saatvik foods, their children are not even there in those schools.
So basically the kids in Karnataka, for example, where they are accustomed to eating non-veg food, you are taking that away and giving them veg food.
Yes.
Of a
And
certain
it's
type.
not only that, you're also making them feel shame. You're also making them feel you're a good person, you're a better person if you give up these things. So parents tell us, parents say ever since these, ideologically driven organizations started giving food, children come and tell us, why should we eat onion and garlic? Why should we eat eggs? So they carry those, wrong notions back home. And these are children who already malnourished. Like we have almost 1 in 3 children who are malnourished. So what is the ethics of telling such children that you, as it is, you get such little protein, give up that also. But yeah, that's what's happening, and the corporates are kind of capitalizing also. These are the national corporates, but you also have the international corporates who are.
So when you speak about these corporates who have a sort of a dharmic balance of what should be done in terms of dharma, what should we eat in, but when the midday meal was started, who was supposed to prepare it, and why did these elements not exist then?
So yeah, one of the criteria for the midday meals was also that Dalit cooks should be given preference, again to break that whole caste barrier. And I think this idea of vegetarianism has been there. It's just become very visible and very in your face now. Because if you see even earlier, the researchers, even the researchers who research on nutrition used to say this, that India is vegetarian, or they'll say India cannot afford animal foods. So if you look at all the guidelines, the policies, it is only about cereals. Most of the time they're promoting cereals. At the most, they might say millets, which again is the same food group as cereals, or they might say pulses. But people feel, they almost feel like they're polluted just by saying in their documents, saying egg, or, mentioning other meats. So even the guidelines, like if you see the ministry, the Women and Child Department, most of them are mainly talking about cereals, and at the most maybe some dals. So it has been there, but now I think there's a kind of hyper, flexion about vegetarianism, and so caste is kind of emerging in different forms. I think this is just a little more virulent form. And what is happening is, any of us, we might have any kind of skill. You might be a doctor, you might be a policymaker, but if you criticize these organizations, then they won't say she's anti-caste. They'll say she's anti-Hindu. So it's a kind of way to silence criticism. I think the space to question is also becoming much narrower. People are not looking at, say, food policy from the scientific part of it. If you looked at the science of it, and you see which are the best sources of protein, which are the best source of vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, it is animal source. It's not coming from any ideological place. It's totally research based, but people don't want to engage with that. And recently the Prime Minister made a statement that some statistics showed that India can have obesity in 2030. And therefore, the Ministry of Education just put out a blanket thing saying fats, oils in the midday meal scheme has to drop by 10%. So first of all, how much they should receive. So for instance, if you look at the plate of a child, at least 20 to 30% of the calories should come from fats. Because fats have important role. They have important role in brain functioning. They have important role in organ functioning. They help in absorption of fat soluble vitamins. So if you're eating food and you want to absorb vitamin A, if that food doesn't have fat or oil, it's not going to absorb it. The body is not going to absorb it. So they have such important functions, and then you don't consult, you don't have a group of experts to give you advice. You just just put out a statement, and we got circulars in state of Karnataka saying cut down the oils and fats. And in the midday meal scheme, they're not even saying it's the urban, the elite, people who might be eating a lot of junk food, who are getting a lot of trans fat. You're not even targeting that group. You're targeting the children who are least likely to get adequate fats and oils.
There's a lot of people who say that when you talk about preferences towards the midday meal, when there are Hindu preferences, they are wrong. But if Muslim kids want to eat, say, halal food, that is right. I have not found the most correct answer for it. So I wanted to ask you what you think.
See, it doesn't matter. You eat whatever you want, but don't make it policy and don't impose it on someone else. I think that's a crucial difference. If tomorrow a bunch of Muslims took over policy and said, everyone has to eat halal food, of course we are going to protest. We're going to have the same objections. And you also need to provide people alternatives. So if tomorrow if someone says don't eat pork, and there's a whole bunch of people who are depending on it for livelihood, you cannot just overnight impose bans, bring in pork slaughter bans, and say nobody should be transporting pork, nobody should be eating it. We'll come into your house, we'll open your fridge. What are you giving them as an alternative? And what are you doing for people's livelihoods? So you can't make policies based on prejudices or misconceptions. And I think that's where the problem is. And people also say we don't want halal, we want jatka. Okay, open your jatka shops. Like, who's stopping you? The whole shift of the meat trade, the whole cattle, and even the byproducts, like whether it's the skin, all of that. Why did the trade shift? Why is it majority it's the Muslim and Dalit community which are handling it? It's because the others don't want to do it. They see it as unclean. They see the people handling it as polluted, untouchable, and therefore you didn't want to handle meat shops. So if you want jatka, then like open one in every street. Like, who cares? It's good. More people eat meat, the happier we are as nutritionists.
Yeah, but coming back to this organization that kind of takes the midday meal order and then they start distributing the ideology with the food.
Yeah.
This exists in every state possibly.
I wouldn't say that. I think like Tamil Nadu has been very progressive. Kerala also, and even in Andaman, they have actually had a more diverse plate. And in fact, elections have been won based on promising better food in the midday meal. Tamil Nadu gives eggs every day. I don't think it's the same across states. We've seen a general trend that when the BJP is there, the chances of the states getting egg is much less. But ironically, in Karnataka, it came when the BJP was there. And what we saw in Karnataka is actually earlier there was like whether you look at religious leaders, whether you look at caste leaders, earlier there was resistance to eggs, but of late there's been a split. There are more people who are saying, we shouldn't bring in religion, we shouldn't bring in ideology. And now, in fact, in Karnataka, children are getting eggs every day in the midday meal scheme. So I think that's good that the more people are informed, the more people demand, the more aware people are about nutrition. I think that's a huge gap. The knowledge itself, because of I would say it's like a caste and a corporate nexus. So the West has actually created a lot of problems in terms of say. So there was a time when obesity was not a big deal in the US, and then the corporates came in and they started saying that saturated fats are bad, cholesterol is bad, red meats are bad. Natural fats like butter is bad, you should replace it with margarine. And incidentally, the obesity started rising around that time. When the whole idea of ultra-processed foods came into the market, obesity, heart disease, all of those started rising. And even though now they have shifted their stance, if you see the American dietary guidelines, they say cholesterol is not a nutrient of concern. Even about saturated fats, they're saying there's no evidence, clear, hard evidence. But in India, it continues. In India, even if your cholesterol is slightly high, they'll ask you to stop eating. Like every condition, I was working with patients who have HIV, which is a wasting illness. Even there, the doctors are saying give up meat. So it's like a standard solution. For any condition, they'll say give up meat, give up eggs. But that is, wrong advice.
But what happened in America in terms of did the corporates start entering the classrooms and deciding meals?
Now, in many of the Western countries, they've started bringing in the climate change. Saying that you need to have plant-based foods. If you notice, they will not say fruits and vegetables, because fruits and vegetables don't depend on markets. But they say plant-based, and the plant-based is soya, corn, and pea extract. And they will add, so vitamin B12 is not available in plant source foods. So they say we will add additives, we will add chemicals, and most of these are owned by large companies like what we call the big food, same like we have big pharma. And they are pushing for this ultra processed packaged foods. And many of these came together and they brought in something called the Eat Lancet Commission. The Eat Lancet Commission is basically they want to decide a diet for the planet. It's called a planetary health diet. And they ironically say that India is a model. So they came to India, they had a huge conference. The Food Safety Standards Authority of India organized that conference. Basically, it's a government and multinational company collaborative to bring in this model where they say India is a way forward, like other countries should eat like India.
So 1 out of 3 kids in every country should be
Malnourished, yeah. And basically they say the same thing. They say India is vegetarian. You all eat a lot of legumes. You all don't eat meat. It's taking on this narrative and just building on that. There's no due diligence. There's no accountability. Like the fact that the West has been saying cholesterol is bad for years, and it has caused so much of damage. Because that diet, what it does is it aggravates the non-communicable diseases like diabetes, heart disease, obesity, hypertension. But there's no one who's apologizing or no one saying, we made a mistake. And it's a very corporate-led agenda. So now you have the vegans. You have the people who are saying, animals are sentient beings, you shouldn't eat animals. They talk about factory farming. They show all gory videos, of animals. They talk about climate. And who are you burdening with this to address it? Some of the poorest people in the world. You take your children. In fact, at that conference, they said start early. Start with the adolescents. Target, they use the word target. They said target the adolescents in your midday meal scheme. Get them to go plant-based. Get them to go vegan. So, yeah, it's a huge nexus.
So in India also corporates interfere with the midday meal system?
So now they're bringing this plant-based into Indian narrative, the food, and they're definitely targeting the midday meal scheme. Then they're also targeting the ICDS, the Anganwadis. So they've been constantly bringing in these premixed foods or packaged foods. In Karnataka, they had brought big packets with rice, dal, sambar powder, all mixed. And then the teacher was just supposed to add hot water and give it to the children. And the children were running away. Like every time there's, like in Anganwadis, it's time for lunch, the children are just running away because that oil used to smell stale. So that the efforts of the corporates to take over these schemes has been constant. In fact, in Karnataka, they brought in a scheme for breakfast in schools, which is like another Saatvik organization called Annapurna Trust and Kellogg's. And Kellogg's is saying we are concerned about the health of the children. They got kicked out of most of the countries because it's well known that the cereals are just sugar and carbohydrates and it's ultra processed. And now they're coming to India and they're, this whole benevolent, we care about the children. But it's not, because first of all, you're going to get children addicted to a whole bunch of ultra processed foods. Secondly, you're taking away what we call food sovereignty. The idea that you grow your own food. See, the factory farming in the West and the pastoralist farming in India is very different. A lot of people livelihoods. So you have small farmers who'll own 1 acre on no land, who'll have some cattle. In fact, they call the cattle their bank on hooves. It's such a lifeline for them, economic support. So there's a marriage, someone falls sick, or education, you need to pay fees. They use that cattle for that income.
It's collateral.
Yeah. And there's a whole chain, right? It's not like so the farmers, for the farmers, the cattle are very important. And for the farmers, if a cattle becomes unproductive, it's no use for them. It's a huge burden for them. So they sell it. It's only when the cattle is unfit for, or it's sick, or it's dying, or it cannot be used for the farming, that it's sold. And then the meat is consumed by someone else. And then there are people who are working with the byproducts, people who buy the blood, or people who buy the bones, people who use the leather. So there are different trades that are dependent on it. In fact, the pharma industry also gets a lot of its products from the cattle. So there's a chain. In terms of the livestock itself, the manure, what it does to the soil, like the quality of the soil when there's livestock versus when you're using chemical pesticides and insecticides. So all of those have to be factored in. And instantly what they're doing in India, because we also have anemia, they're now bringing in again a corporate-led solution. They're saying fortify the rice. So now you are eating rice. The rice doesn't have protein, rice doesn't have vitamins, doesn't have iron, calcium. So instead of saying bring in foods, bring in diversity, add eggs, add meat, add dals, add vegetables, you're saying take that same rice and add iron to it. And that depends again on companies. And we don't have those companies like what you call the premix. It's not available in India. So you're bringing it from outside. They're spending like crores paying companies, international companies for the premix. And then they made it universal. Universal means any PDS or ICDS midday meals will have fortified rice. So you cannot, like if you're growing rice, you cannot just say, okay, I'll give it to the local school or give it to the corporation, food corporation. You have to give it to a company. The company will add this fortification and then sell it back to you or market it back to you. Then it gets a shelf life because you have to consume it within a certain period of time. And there's no evidence that fortification makes your anemia better. In fact, it has a lot of side effects. For example, we have tribal population who have thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, for whom iron is dangerous. So you just blanket, it's like a medicine. It's not a food. Iron is not a food. It is a chemical which has, a lot of side effects. Like we have a lot of diseases which are not diagnosed. We have TB which is not diagnosed. We have malnutrition. To those people, if you give iron, it causes a flare-up. So TB which was dormant, you give them iron, it's going to flare up the TB. Children with malnutrition have low immunity. Therefore, like normally what we get symptoms in a healthy child with good immunity who might get diarrhea or cough as a response to an infection, a malnourished child may not have those responses. Once you give iron to that child, then all these flare up. So it's not a thought out process. And the reason it's not thought out is because it's the poor who are going to be most affected by these things.
Yeah, coming to the kind of food they eat, uh, many people say that, oh, it's just one meal a day.
Yeah.
Rest 2 meals they have freedom. So, but if the taste is developed for this sort of foods, it's very difficult to keep switching.
Yeah, and also the school is a place for child to learn to what's the message you're teaching children. Like you first of all you're teaching them to reject your own culture, your own foods. And secondly, you're giving them a lot of misinformation. Like for example, onion and garlic, they help absorption of iron and zinc. So if your food, like say you eat vegetables, millets, normally they have plant-based foods have phytates, they have oxalates, they have tannins, which even if there's iron in those foods, it is not absorbed. So zinc and iron are better absorbed if you add onion and garlic. Studies show that. So you're removing that also. You're removing the foods which by foods interact with each other. For example, if you take vitamin C, if you take lemon juice, orange juice, or any foods with vitamin C, guavas, amla, it's like the idea of taking pickle. So you have like lime pickle or amla pickle. They help absorption of iron from the food. So foods interact like that. So you need people to understand those things, and you need to bring in science into the food planning of the foods. But right now it's totally not science. It's anti-science almost.
So, what is the sort of midday meal policy that you would like to see going forward?
See, like I said, the 6 food groups. So at least 4 of those in each meal is the what we call a balanced and a diverse diet. And like say for example, if you're having millets, it should be sprouted, soaked. So foods that have a lot of phytates and tannins and oxalates, if you soak them, say even for 4 hours or overnight, and then you allow it to ferment, it gives it the best nutrition. Then what food you have in combination, like for example, if you want to absorb iron and you have tea or coffee or even milk with your food, absorption comes down. But if you have lemon juice, orange juice, even buttermilk, the absorption goes up. And in fact, iron, there's heme iron and there's non-heme iron. Heme iron is mainly from animal sources and non-heme is from plant sources. Heme iron is much better absorbed. So even if you have like a lot of vegetables and you have a bit of a meat, it helps absorbing the iron from the other foods. So and cereals. So most of your caloric requirement should come from non-cereal sources first. So the way you calculate. So like say for example, 100 grams of rice would, when it's cooked, would give you 120 calories. And it will give you about 7 grams of not so great protein. So if you want a child to get 450 calories, the child has to eat quarter kg of rice if you're only giving rice. But if you cut down the rice and you add an egg or you add milk or meat, then the child gets some amount of calories from that, but it also gets the other nutrients. It also gets protein, also get vitamins and minerals. So at least 15 to 20% of your calories should come from proteins. And at least in adults you need about 20 to 30% from fats, but in older, I mean for children, you need 30 to 40% should come from fats, and only 60% should come from your cereals and carbohydrates. So that would be a balanced meal.
And when all these corporations run TV commercials targeting mothers and kids, none of the commercials are about these aspects of food and what they should consume.
Yeah. So for them also it's the cheapest carbohydrate base, like like now what's coming globally is based on peas. So they do what is monocropping. In fact, Bill Gates is the largest owner of the agricultural land now in the US, I think. He's acquired it. They're going to do monocropping. So they'll grow these, soya, corn, sometimes some of these are genetically modified. And on that, they will add things like extracts, they'll add coloring agents, and they'll add, supplements, what like B12, and what we call fortification, and then they'll sell it to us. So for them, that's lucrative, uh, because then you become dependent on the company, and they can't just say buy it. They want to also guilt trip you. They want to say, by eating this, you're somehow benefiting the climate. You're not going to talk about your industries, you're not going to talk about your automobiles, even digital pollution that's happening. What is the ecological cost of shipping foods, fortification from 5 countries like Switzerland, Netherlands, France to India, and making us dependent on the fortification, and then talk about climate, and then also marketing, all these foods. So the food sovereignty, I think, is getting affected by these things. So companies don't want to say that. They're either telling you it's good for your health, or they're telling you it's good for the climate, or they talk about animal rights.
And all these things are not a main issue for India, where a country we need to work on our nutrition, give kids a balanced meal. So these are not our issues currently.
Absolutely, and also livelihood. If you give, say, women groups poultry, and you use the eggs for the schools, and they're also eating the chicken, they're also selling it and getting income. Same with other livestock. Like, it's such a sustainable model.
But they are currently targeting kids at a young age so that this is the only nutrition they know.
Yeah, exactly. And getting them. In fact, it was so shocking that Eat Lancet Commission, they said, for adolescent girls, instead of giving them meat, because they are prone to anemia, instead of giving them meat, give them supplements, give them iron tablets, and give them supplements. So basically, what you're telling people is shift from foods to
Supplements, pills.
supplements, pills, potions, packaged foods. And some of these are also addictive, I think, and it's convenient. Instead of cooking, you just have all of these packaged foods that are coming into your homes. It makes it appear like it's cutting your the work labor that you put in, but you're also becoming very dependent on companies in the process.
They want us to them entirely stop cooking.
Yeah, that's what they're selling to us. That it's like Maggie. It's like 2 minutes. So just boil your Maggie and eat it.
Another thing that comes to mind is that when this started happening, people did have a very reaction to it for the first time, for the second time. But when it keeps happening on a daily basis, then people also don't seem to
becomes normalized.
Yeah, it's just very normalized right now to play with kids' food and stuff.
Yeah.
So if there is a parent who is listening, what is the sort of nutrition that they should seek if their kid is not in the midday meal program?
Yeah, I think as much as possible, use food that doesn't have an ingredient list. So if you're going to the shop and there's cabbage, buy the cabbage. If there's fruits or vegetables or something, it doesn't have an ingredient list. Meat is meat, but once you start processing it, so they'll say we add sodium, we add this, we add fat, this is low fat, low sugar, high this, high that. That is your processed food. I think we should avoid those things. And also, if you know the food groups, at each meal you should make sure that at least each of those groups is represented. Fats and oils have been vilified, and now there's a lot of research to show that fats and oils are very important. So to make sure that your proteins, you have your good quality protein sources. Now, like let's say, like you're doing a show, right? And you can keep talking all the shows, and that's still a show. Or you can invite people who have different skills and they talk on the show. The one with only you talking is the cheaper option, right? Like you can sit in one room in a studio and keep talking. It's cheap. If you have to bring in people, it'll, in terms of labor, in terms of time, it's much more difficult. It's the same with food. You can get your whatever energy with just carbohydrates or cereals, but you have to bring in other qualities. The protein that you get from cereals is very different from what you get from animal sources. Animal source food, including milk, the quality is much better. It's better digested, it's better absorbed, more available to the body. So someone will say like, Horlicks has soya, and they say soya has good protein. But soya is very difficult to digest. The quality is not as good as, say, organ meat. So the way they market to you is what it has. But what we need to really try to understand is the quality. Which is the best source for my child? Organ meats are actually very good. How often do you hear about it? You never hear about it. Dry fish, which a lot of people eat, enjoy, but they feel some shame because of the strong smell. Like you wouldn't go and sit in a group and say, hey, I enjoy dry fish. There is some shame that people feel about it. But it has very good protein. It has in fact, children, grandmothers say children eat a little more quantity when we add dry fish because, the taste, they enjoy it. And this satiety is also very important. Satiety, where, you give a child a meal and the child feels satisfied. And we've seen repeatedly with Akshay Patra, there's so much wastage. Like we say, food, respect food, but these organizations, there's so much of wastage. Because they're centralized kitchens, sometimes they're located 40 kilometers away from the schools. They start cooking at 3 a.m. And then they have these big... So the idea of sanitization, the idea of hygiene is again very casteist when it comes to food. So the selling point for these organizations is that they're hygienic. They're not like your local Dalit cook because they're dirty. So mentally, they sell that, but any cook needs training. Any cook, even if it's a hostel or whether it's an organization, whether it's school, you need to train them because, hygiene is not it doesn't come automatically to us. We need training, all of us. But the way they say it is, our food is clean. Our food is prepared hygienically. So they have these big steel drums. The food is made there. And then by 9 o'clock, it's left in the schools. And by the time the children eat, it's cold. In Karnataka, the State Food Commission visited and they said in summer, the sambar is almost smelling because it's been transported and just left there for such long distances. The rice is like one clump of rice. So the child gets one piece of rice. It's like a lump of rice. The sambar is very watery. So ideally, if you're having cereals and pulses, it should be in the ratio of 3:1. 3 portions of cereal, 1 portion of pulses to get a balance of the proteins. Because cereals are missing some protein, pulses are missing other proteins. So once you have them together in a combination of 3:1, then you get all the amino acids that you need. So their sambar is very watery. And they use some very watery vegetables. And children are not happy. Like we visited so many schools and children are not happy. At the same time, we visited school-based kitchens. So there's a grandma there or somebody the kids know. There's a smell of food being cooked. People feel hungry. Hunger, feeling hungry, feeling stimulated. That's also important. Here, there's no smell. There's nothing. It's just a box with food there. But in the school, even when we went there, we started feeling hungry because you can smell the food is cooking. And, they pick up the children who are not or eating less and they'll say, come, take more. And for us, the best measure of quality is whether the teachers also eat. With school-based, invariably we find the teachers also eat there. But with these centralized kitchens, I have not seen any teacher, actually eating that food. But they also do a lot of lobbying. This Akshay Patra, they lobby with the chief secretary, they lobby with the principal secretary. So in Karnataka, the joint director of the midday meals said there are a lot of complaints and they wanted to cancel the contract with Akshay Patra. And they refused to sign the contract. So they directly approached the higher officials, and then the joint director was asked to consult with the National Institute of Nutrition to get their opinion. And they actually didn't even visit the schools. They didn't talk to parents, they didn't talk to children, they didn't even come. They saw a menu given by Akshay Patra and they said everything is good based on a paper menu. They just looked at that and they said taste is good, diversity is good, nutrition is good, everything is good. And then later on we found that one of their person from NIN was on the board of Akshay Patra. Conflict of interest.
Only conflict, zero interest.
Yeah, true.
Thank you for your time. It was great talking to you. Yeah, we got everything.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
End class.